For years, the people of Kanungu, Uganda had known Credonia Merinde as a violent bar owner who dabbled as a prostitute. So, it came as a shock to them when she became a devout Catholic, praying for hours on end while claiming the ability to receive messages from the Virgin Mary. Those who knew her thought that she had finally changed her life for the better. Little did they know, the worst was yet to come. Credonia and her accomplices managed to murder thousands of the congregants, making her one of the worst mass murderers in the world. Quick disclaimer, before I begin this story, there has been speculation as to who the mastermind of the cult was. There's a lot of people that believe that Joseph Kibotere was the leader. However, throughout my research, I have reason to believe that Credonia was the one calling the shots. However, irrespective of who the mastermind was, all the leaders of this group were murderous religious fanatics who were equally responsible for destroying thousands of innocent lives. Credonia Merinde was born in 1952. She was described as being charming and intelligent. She was also known for her beauty, with soft skin and flawless complexion. Her voice was described as being gentle and pleasing. Not a lot is known about Credonia's childhood, other than the fact that she had 3 brothers. At some point, she got married to a gentleman by the name of Eric Mazima. Apparently, everyone that knew Credonia knew that she absolutely loved money. In fact, her husband stated that, quote, she was never as happy as when she was making money. When she was in her 20s, Credonia was broke and she needed to make some money. She decided to use her charm and convince Eric to kick out his second wife, sell his land, and use that money to open a bar with her. Her bar business went on and she dabbled in bartending and prostitution. Now, this is where things started getting a little bit crazy. Credonia was known to have a bit of a violent streak. She particularly had an obsession with fire, often using it as a weapon of choice against her enemies. One example of this is when she had an altercation with a local health official. She got so mad, she burnt his household belongings. This obviously freaked out her family and they believed that she was mentally ill. They made the decision to send her away for treatment. One of Credonia's childhood friends alleges that she once seduced a motorist who was passing through, killed him while he slept, and took his money. Apparently, when customers went to her bar in the morning, they found her washing blood off the concrete. Over the years, police said that stealthy murder became a tool she used to accumulate wealth and to silence her accusers. One particular interesting fact was that all her 3 brothers died off one by one, leaving her to inherit her father's land. They all died through suspected poisoning. In 1989, 10 years after opening for business, her bar went broke. After this happened, she claimed to have seen the Virgin Mary in a cave just outside Kanungu, and she converted to Roman Catholicism. This was a new chapter in Credonia's life. She appeared to have changed her life. She was described as being very devout. She spent hours praying, writing, and fasting on a regular basis. She slept without a mattress and never smiled for some reason. She would black out periodically in the middle of conversations with people to receive messages from the Virgin Mary. Having been a bar owner and occasional prostitute in her past, there was some mystery about her, and some of her neighbors compared her to Mary Magdalene in the Bible. Her devotion to religion was inspiring because it showed how religion can completely change your life. Her new reputation helped her enlist the help of 2 respected local clerics. They were Dominic Kataribabo, who was an excommunicated priest, and Joseph Chibotere, a devout Catholic. Joseph Chibotere was fascinated by visionaries. In fact, he himself had admitted to having a vision in 1984. Credonia approached him and told him that in addition to having a vision of the Virgin Mary close to his house, the Virgin Mary had told her that a man named Joseph Chibotere was going to help her restore the 10 Commandments. Joseph was absolutely elated and flattered that he had an important role to play in the quest for salvation. Together, in 1989, They formed the Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God. Theirs was a religious sect that split from the Roman Catholic Church in Uganda and preached about repentance before the end of the world in the year 2000. Being a respectable man in the community, Joseph's conversion to Miranda's beliefs gave the movement instant respectability. At this point, Credonia was living in Joseph's home, which he shared with a couple of other relatives. They all lived in a compound together. Credonia did not get along with any of them. They kind of hated her, and they thought that the two, Joseph and Credonia, were having an affair. The family finally had enough of her antics when she allegedly beat up Joseph's wife and burnt some of her stuff. Joseph's family finally kicked her out. In 1991, Joseph followed her and moved into her compound. He became a figurehead of the cult. Credonia transformed Joseph Chibwatere into a kind of Christ figure. He wore a Catholic bishop's robe and ring. He alone was allowed to ordain young men into the cult's priesthood. It's been reported that Credonia used him because of his money and because he was a man. Credonia transformed her father's land to the cult's headquarters. They registered the movement as a group whose aim was to obey the Ten Commandments and preach the word of Jesus Christ. Christian icons were prominent in the movement's compound, and the cult had links to Roman Catholicism, with its leadership dominated by a number of former priests and nuns. Asala Komuhangi and Dominic Kataribabo were notable figures in the group. Credonia ran her cult in the late 80s. This was one of the most unstable periods in Uganda's history. Ugandans were reeling from a civil war caused by the ousting of dictator Idi Amin that tore the country apart. In addition to the political turmoil, Uganda was also facing an AIDS crisis. According to ex-members of the cult, people sought refuge and comfort in the stability of the group, believing that if they prayed and repented enough, things would get better. The movement grew rapidly, and at its height, membership was estimated as being between 1,000 to 4,000. To outsiders, Joseph Chibwatere was the group's leader, but in reality, he was just a figurehead, intended to impose masculine authority over the followers and enhance the cult's public relations. Behind closed doors, Credonia was really the one running the show. She was referred to as the programmer. Questions would be sent to her in writing, and she would write back with answers. She was described as being the true power in the movement. According to some senior members, she was the one that chaired their meetings and was the source of the cult's predictions of an apocalypse and the pronouncements that salvation could only be found with the Virgin Mary's messages. The group believed that the world would end at the beginning of the new millennium, so doomsday was on December 31st, 1999. She claimed that the Virgin Mary had revealed sinister prophecies of famines and wars, with rivers turning to blood and food turning to poison. According to her, their only hope was to repent. The community was self-sustaining. They would take in whole families and provide for their every need. The members grew their own food and used their skills to contribute to labor. Devotion to the movement regularly involved pilgrimage to a steep rocky hill nearby. After a tough hike through a eucalyptus forest, the followers would reach a rock that they believed depicted the Virgin Mary. To join the group, followers were expected to sell off their possessions, turn over the money to the church, and live in the compound. When entering the compound, new members would be asked to take off all their clothes, and they would be given the cult's uniform to put on. The followers would wear green, while the leaders wore black. Life there was horrible. Their daily routine consisted of being awakened at 3 o'clock every morning, followed by 2 hours of prayers. They fasted 2 days a week, and on the other 5 days, they were fed very little. The hunger was so bad that children were eating whatever insects they would find. When they were caught, they would be punished. The children, who are not allowed to go to school, were infested with disease, but they didn't dare complain. In order to join the sect, followers had sworn absolute poverty, chastity, and obedience. They slept on the floor, washed themselves with coarse laundry soap, and observed strict silence at all times. This led them to occasionally communicate using sign language. They were never allowed to speak to their immediate superiors, much less to the 12 supreme leaders of the movement, a management structure based on the 12 apostles. I'm going to read extracts from interviews conducted on former cult members by various media outlets. Miss Ariho joined the movement with her family when she was 10 years old. Her widowed mother was struggling to raise 3 children, one of whom suffered from persistent headaches. Credonia's group offered prayer and a sense of belonging. Miss Ariho's family hosted a branch of the church with about 100 members in their compound. This was 2 kilometers outside the town of Rukungiri. She says, quote, "Life rotated around prayer. Although we also farmed, we did everything possible to avoid sin. Sometimes, if you sinned, they would command you to recite the rosary 1,000 times. You had to do it. You would ask your friends and family to help until you had served your punishment." Another former cult member, Mary Kasambi, said, quote, "I had sores on my feet, my arms, and my legs, but I didn't care. I believed what I was doing was right. Credonia could say, 'Today we are all going to dig for 1 week,' or 'Today we are not going to eat for 3 days,' and we wouldn't. Credonia would get a program from heaven, from the Virgin Mary, and she would transmit it to us. Our job was to obey. I don't believe people went to Credonia asking for their money. You didn't ask questions." Kasambi left the cult in 1997 after she saw her 4 young children foraging for grasshoppers to eat. Investigators say that Credonia apparently played off fear of the devil to persuade her closest aides to commit mass murder. Several former cult members described how she fostered a visceral, overpowering fear of demonic intrusion into the cult. Every object that came from the outside, be it money, clothes, food, or medicine, had to be exorcised with prayer. She said that the devil was everywhere. Credonia was a ruthless leader. It's been reported that she once led followers on a punishment raid of relatives who had refused to join the cult. Several reports indicate that she would use poison as a murder weapon to eliminate those that she considered to be her enemies. The year 2000 was fast approaching. According to the followers of the movement, this was to be the end of the world. To prepare for this event, members sold off their possessions and turned the profits over to the group's leadership. Finally, the day was upon them, December 31st, 1999. Followers waited patiently for Armageddon, but shockingly for them, nothing happened. It was just a regular day. When the world did not end by January 1st, it is theorized that trouble started brewing in the movement. Members began asking questions and demanded the return of their money and property. There was another theory that there was growing skepticism about Credonia's power and those of the other leaders. Either way, there was a crisis, and the leaders needed to fix it. Shortly after dawn on Friday, March 17, 2000, 500 people, mostly women and children, had burnt their belongings, showered, clipped their nails, shaved their hair with razors, and put on their green and white uniforms. Credonia summoned them into the church, which they called the Ark. The church was lined with 68 jerrycans filled with gasoline. Cult leaders nailed the doors and windows shut and set the church on fire. No one managed to escape, and all 500 people died an agonizing death. It is believed that Credonia, together with her accomplices, fled the scene. Authorities were alerted to the compound by neighbors complaining of a fire and a horrible smell coming from the direction of the cult's compound. When the authorities arrived, they were met with a horrific scene. The charred remains of approximately 500 people lay at one end of the chapel. Virtually no one could be positively identified. The police theorized that the cult members had committed mass suicide, but that theory was quickly dismissed after officials were drawn by a horrible stench coming from what was believed to be a pit latrine. Police discovered the bodies of 6 large men, partly dissolved in sulfuric acid. 5 of them had been poisoned to death, and 1 had been killed by a blow to the head. This led authorities to begin investigations into the deaths. They soon found out that the fire was just the beginning. In subsequent days, police found hundreds of bodies buried in mass graves at other properties owned by the cult across southwestern Uganda. 155 bodies were found buried inside Dominic Kataribabo's house and in pit latrines outside. The bodies were cemented under the floors of the house, and maize was planted on the outside graves. The victims, half of them children, had been poisoned. Those who had not died quickly and quietly had been stabbed, strangled, or beaten to death. They lay buried in several mass graves, naked, stripped of all identifying features, and stacked together in pit latrines. With this evidence, police theorized that the 6 men found in the pit latrine in the compound were the executioners that had carried out these massacres.
Joseph Kibwetere's compound is abandoned now to the ghosts of his victims, the 330 people who perished here when they were herded into a church and incinerated. Inside the classrooms are the lists of children who studied here and died here. He told his followers this place would be their ark of salvation and used radio broadcasts to attract converts drawn by his promises of heaven, but only for those faithful to God's commandments.
Various press reports put the police estimate of the overall death toll at around 1,000 to 3,000 victims. This surpasses the mass suicide of 914 people in Jonestown, Guyana in November 1978 by members of the People's Temples Church led by the deranged leader Jim Jones. During investigations, one question was constantly being asked: where was Credonia Mwerinde? Ugandan authorities believe that Credonia, Dominic Kataribabo, Joseph Kibwetere, and other leaders of the movement left the sect's Kanungu compound in the early hours of March 17th. In April 2000, police offered 2 million Ugandan shillings for any information on their whereabouts. The real death toll was certainly much higher, but the exact figure may never be known. The Ugandan police was ill-equipped at handling investigations of that magnitude. Local leaders also faced scrutiny for ignoring illegal practices the cult was involved in. There was an uproar after videos of barefoot prisoners forced to dig up the mass graves surfaced. The local police responded to this backlash by saying that they did not have adequate funding needed to conduct investigations. They also added that providing protective gear to the prisoners was not part of the contract. After this incident, the government of Uganda stated that they would be alert and would monitor some of the cults in the country to prevent a repeat of what happened in Kanungu. Detectives believed that Credonia was still alive. Some believed that she fled to Europe, while others believed that she and Dominic Kataribabo walked across the frontier into Congo. At the time, Eastern Congo was a lawless land filled with warring fractions, including Hutu militiamen who fled to the area after their campaign of genocide in Rwanda. A manhunt in the area was out of the question. Credonia was branded by some as the worst mass religious murderer in the world. Police issued international arrest warrants for the leaders of the group in connection to the massacres. Authorities were puzzled over how the movement's leadership could have managed to secretly massacre so many people in cult compounds across Uganda. The most disturbing fact is that, were it not for the discovery of the 6 men in the pit latrine, the murder of the last 500 cult members would have been dismissed as suicide. No investigation would have been launched, and no mass graves would have been uncovered. It would have been the perfect murder. 22 years later, no one has been prosecuted in connection with the massacre, and the cult leaders, if they are alive, have never been found. There's a lot of speculation as to why Credonia and her group decided to commit the murders. Credonia's family members and acquaintances said that escaping with her followers' money would not have been enough. She also had a lifelong need to eliminate anyone who knew her intimate secrets. Killing her congregants would have done that, and making it look like a collective suicide would have prevented her from being suspected of mass murder. Another theory would be that she was just a violent, cold-blooded killer. What do you guys think was the motive for the murder? Which theory do you think makes sense to you? I would love to hear your opinions in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching until the end. I really appreciate it, you guys. I put a lot of effort in these videos, and you guys watching it makes me feel really nice. So I have a few questions as usual. The first question is, do you think that Credonia was really the mastermind of this whole movement, this whole cult, or do you think it was Joseph Chibwatere? Another question is, what do you think happened to the cult leaders? Do you think that they escaped and they're somewhere roaming the streets, living their best life, or do you think they died in the fire? Yes, what are your thoughts? I would like to hear them, and we'll talk about it in the comment section. Again, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. And if you have suggestions on other African cases that you think I should talk about, leave your suggestions and I will look into them. If you'd like to read more on this case, I put links on all of my sources in the description box below. Feel free to check them out. Thank you so much. See you next week. Bye bye.